Chapter 124. Slain Immortals, Who Needs a Saber? The fierce wind howled. It was still snowing on the ancestral master peak. Whoosh! Lin Fei opened his eyes. It's been 3 days. It's time to lead the disciples to the Martial Alliance and participate in the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. Lin Fei murmured softly. Ever since 3 days ago, when Lin Fei's master Zhao Kunming accidentally comprehended the sword intent, he returned to his cave and closed himself off. Zhao Kunming's unexpected comprehension of sword intent. 9 Profound Sect had one more Grand Elder with sword intent. For the 9 Profound Sect, this was naturally a good thing. System. Lin Fei brought up the system panel. He had been on the ancestral master peak for almost 20 days. Every day, he honed his saber intent. He hadn't carefully examined the changes in his martial arts. Host, Lin Fei. Martial arts realm, innate martial artist. Master, mid-stage. True intention scroll, mid-stage, 2% progress. Saber intent, mastery, 61% progress. Fist intent, mastery, 51% progress. Heavenly saber art, mastery, 40% progress. Immeasurable fist, proficient, 40% progress. Close yet distant, proficient, 40% progress. Lin Fei's true intention scroll had reached the mid-stage. That is to say, Lin Fei is now in the mid-stage of the innate realm. The saber chi in his body had increased 5-fold. It was very difficult for an innate martial artist to improve. However, even if it was just advancing a small realm, the gap was enormous and the strength would be greatly improved. However, after reaching the mid-stage of the innate realm, Lin Fei found that even if there was abundant spiritual chi on the ancestral master peak, the cultivation progress of the true intention scroll was still slow. It could only advance about 1% per day. Moreover, Lin Fei had a feeling. Once he reached the late stage, without external help, the cultivation progress of the true intention scroll might not be able to advance. This was not because the true intention scroll wasn't working hard. In fact, the saber intent was pushing the true intention scroll every day, striving to cultivate. It's just that the cultivation speed of the true intention scroll was so slow. After all, the true intention scroll had an extra step of integrating martial Dao true intent compared to ordinary martial arts. The speed would naturally slow down. As for saber intent and fist intent, saber intent had improved a lot, while fist intent had only improved a little bit. This showed that saber intent could still be improved through honing. It's just that it was still very slow. Then there were Heavenly Saber Art, Immeasurable Fist, and Close Yet Distant. Their cultivation speed was about 2% per day. It should not be a problem for these 3 martial arts to reach transcendence. As for achieving perfection, it is necessary to find the character of the 3 martial arts. Or, the 3 martial arts might also need a bit of luck. Innate mid-stage, with thick saber chi. It's time to go out and explore the world. Lin Fei stood up. Then, he took a step forward. Whoosh! Lin Fei covered a distance of 30 meters in 1 step. Step by step, he walked towards the main hall. 9 Profound Sect main hall. More than a dozen inner disciples had arrived at the main hall and were on standby. They had already received the news that today Grand Elder, Immortal Slayer Saber, Lin Fei would lead the team to participate in the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. The Martial Alliance Exchange Conference was held once every 10 years. It was a grand event in the martial arts world. However, compared to the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference, these disciples were actually more interested in Immortal Slayer Saber, Lin Fei. News about Lin Fei gradually spread within the 9 Profound Sect. After all, the 9 Profound Sect did not intentionally block the news. Moreover, throughout Great Chan, the feats of Immortal Slayer Saber, Lin Fei became more and more widespread. These outstanding inner disciples of the 9 Profound Sect naturally received the news as well. I heard that this time it's Immortal Slayer Saber, Grand Elder Lin Fei leading the team personally. Grand Elder Lin Fei has recently become a legendary figure in the martial arts world of Great Chan. His battle achievements are simply too fierce. What's more important is that his saber can cut down those haughty chi condensation cultivators. Even when Grand Elder Lin was in the acquired realm, he was able to slay a 6th level chi condensation disciple from the He Mountain Dao. It's truly incredible. I wonder what kind of style Immortal Slayer Saber Grand Elder Lin has. These inner disciples were all looking forward to it in their hearts. Martial artists worship the strong. Besides, the fame of Immortal Slayer Saber has spread far and wide. He can be regarded as the most prominent martial artist in the entire Great Chan right now. How could they not look forward to it? The sect master looked at these disciples below. Although his expression was sullen, he was very pleased. Nowadays, the 9 Profound sect, because of Lin Fei's Immortal Slayer Saber widespread reputation, everyone was practicing martial arts more diligently. Especially the confidence in martial arts. This was something the 9 Profound sect never had before. The belief in martial arts is intangible and untouchable. For martial artists, it is very important. Even the sect master believed that, given time, the strength and cultivation of the entire 9 Profound sect's disciples would greatly improve. This was all thanks to Lin Fei, the Immortal Slayer Saber, and the changes he brought to the 9 Profound sect. Even though Lin Fei, as a Grand Elder, rarely made appearances, it didn't affect his prestige in the hearts of the numerous 9 Profound sect disciples. He's arrived. The sect master suddenly looked up and saw a faint shadow approaching in the distance outside the main hall. The shadow quickly closed the distance, arriving in the main hall within a few leaps. Whoosh! Everyone's gaze turned toward the figure that had just entered the hall. Grand Elder Lin, these disciples have been eagerly awaiting you. The sect master said with a smile. The eyes of a dozen inner sect disciples simultaneously focused on Lin Fei. We greet the Grand Elder. These inner sect disciples spoke in unison, saluting Lin Fei. Lin Fei nodded slightly in acknowledgement, having grown accustomed to his Grand Elder identity. Sect Master, can we depart now? Lin Fei asked. Grand Elder Lin, I entrust these disciples to you, the sect master saluted Lin Fei. These disciples were the elite of the 9 Profound sect and represented its future. There could be no room for failure. Thus, for each martial alliance exchange, an innate martial artist would lead the team to ensure the safety of the disciples to the greatest extent. All right, let's set off. Lin Fei led the group of disciples out of the Grand Hall and arrived at the mountain gate. At this moment, at the mountain gate, more than a dozen swift horses had already been prepared for the long journey to the martial alliance. The dozen inner sect disciples had been carefully observing Lin Fei, but he remained silent, leaving them hesitant to overstep their bounds. Finally, one disciple, carrying a large saber and presumably skilled in saber techniques, couldn't help but ask, Grand Elder Lin, it's widely rumored that you are the Immortal Slayer Saber, possessing divine saber skills that can slay chi condensation cultivators from the Immortal sect. However, we noticed that you don't have a saber on you. Without a saber, how can you be the Immortal Slayer Saber? Pardon our boldness, but may we ask, Grand Elder Lin, have you forgotten to bring your saber? This disciple, carrying the large saber, displayed some courage, voicing the greatest doubt in all the disciples' minds. As a result, all the disciples' gazes were now fixed on Lin Fei. They had searched but couldn't find Lin Fei's saber. But without a saber, how could he be the Immortal Slayer Saber? With a calm expression, Lin Fei glanced at the disciples and noticed the confusion on their faces. He slowly spoke, watch closely, all of you. Slaying immortals, who needs a saber? The next moment, Lin Fei extended his hand. Instantly, the saber chi within his body burst forth. Boom! The saber energy on Lin Fei's hand surged and rapidly condensed into a 30 meters tall saber in midair. Buzz! Some disciples carrying sabers were astonished, their faces filled with horror. Their sabers, seemingly beyond their control, began to tremble and hum as if wanting to break free from their sheaths. Simultaneously, Lin Fei fiercely swung his hand down toward the empty ground outside the mountain gate. Rumble. The 30-meter-tall saber energy viciously slashed the ground, causing the earth to shake violently as if a dragon was turning beneath it. Where Lin Fei's saber chi passed, a massive fissure was cleaved into the ground. From a distance, it seemed as though the empty land outside the mountain gate had been split in two. All the disciples stood with their mouths agape, staring in amazement at the seemingly miraculous fissure on the ground, unable to speak for a long time. "Let's go." Lin Fei didn't linger. He mounted a swift horse and sped away, leaving a trail of dust behind him. Chapter 125. Lin Fei takes his seat, stunning the audience. The Martial Alliance headquarters was situated on Mount City. The reason for choosing this location was quite simple. There was no powerful martial arts sect here. When the Martial Alliance was first established, its purpose was to jointly resist the pressure of the immortal sects. However, martial arts sects were also wary of each other. They feared that a major sect would control the Martial Alliance headquarters, thereby threatening other sects. Thus, Mount City, a place without a powerful martial arts sect, was chosen. Nowadays, the Martial Alliance had declined and had become a mere shell of its former self. Usually, there were only a few disciples in charge of cleaning and guarding the place, without even a single acquired martial artist. This showed the desolation of the Martial Alliance headquarters. However, recently, the headquarters had been receiving a steady stream of visitors from the martial arts world. Consequently, the town at the foot of Mount City gradually became lively. Lin Fei, along with the members of the Nine Profound Sect, arrived at Mount City. Seeing the endless stream of martial artists, many inner sect disciples were excited. "Are those people from the blood refining sect? I heard that the blood refining sect values body refining the most. Their body refining techniques are extremely terrifying. If one's body refining doesn't meet the blood refining sect's requirements, they might even be expelled from the sect. And those white-clad swordsmen, they must be disciples of the Hidden Sword sect, right? The Hidden Sword sect excels in swordsmanship. Each generation of their disciples must venture into the world to inherit the title of the number one sword under heaven. Yes, the Hidden Sword sect is really arrogant. Each generation's top swordsman must use actual combat to seize the title of the number one sword under heaven. That's why the number one sword under heaven in Great Chan almost always comes from the Hidden Sword sect. The Nine Profound Sect disciples were abuzz with chatter. For a moment, Lin Fei realized that these disciples knew more about martial arts sects than he did. The Hidden Sword sect, huh? Lin Fei instantly spotted the Hidden Sword sect disciples. They all carried long swords on their backs. Lin Fei's deep impression of the Hidden Sword sect was for two reasons. One was the sword sage Bai from 300 years ago, who was considered the last martial sage of Great Chan. Secondly, each generation of the Hidden Sword sect produced the most outstanding swordsmen. Moreover, without exception, those who inherited the title of the number one sword under heaven would definitely comprehend sword intent. In the entire Great Chan, martial artists who could comprehend martial Dao true intent were scarce, even countable on one's fingers. But the Hidden Sword sect always occupied one or several spots on that list. Each generation saw the birth of a sword intent expert from the Hidden Sword sect. In this aspect, the Hidden Sword sect was much stronger than the Nine Profound sect. Of course, while the Nine Profound sect disciples discussed other sects, those from other sects also talked about the Nine Profound sect. The Nine Profound sect was not a sect without a foundation. The Nine Profound sect had produced such a remarkable figure as the Nine Profound sect's founder. Back then, he had been invincible, seeking a worthy opponent but failing to find one. Even Foundation establishment realms praised him as an unparalleled genius, rarely seen in the world. And now, although the Nine Profound sect was no longer as strong as it used to be, the Nine Profound sect produced an extraordinary individual. He was the most renowned figure in the entire Great Chan recently. Immortal Slayer Saber. The Nine Profound sect had given birth to the Immortal Slayer Saber. He had slain 2 high-level Qi condensation cultivators from He Mountain Dao. This news had already shaken the entire Great Chan martial arts world. All martial artists felt exhilarated. After all, martial artists had been suppressed by Qi cultivators for too long. The appearance of the Immortal Slayer Saber undoubtedly restored some dignity to martial artists. However, as for who the Immortal Slayer Saber was, what did he look like? Most people were not clear about it. Therefore, many martial artists, although they saw the people from the Nine Profound sect, they did not know which one was the Immortal Slayer Saber. Lin Fei also traveled with the inner sect disciples. He was equally young. No one could tell he was the Grand Elder of the Nine Profound sect. Soon, the Nine Profound sect's group arrived at the Martial Alliance headquarters. Disciples were already there to greet them. We are disciples of the Nine Profound sect. A disciple handed over the invitation letter from the Martial Alliance. Senior brothers and senior sisters of the Nine Profound sect, the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference is about to begin. Please follow me. The reception disciple led the Nine Profound sect members directly to the venue of the exchange conference. Lin Fei took a glance. There were not many martial artists left at the foot of the mountain. Many sects' disciples had arrived at Mount Ken City yesterday or even the day before. They just stayed in the town at the foot of Mount Ken City for one night. As for the Nine Profound sect's group, they had just arrived at Mount Ken City, looking travel-worn. Soon, Lin Fei and the others saw the venue of the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference in the distance. It was a huge open space. Weapon racks were placed all around and various weapons were displayed on them. Each sect occupied a section, forming a large circle. Inside the circle, there were many temporary arenas. These were for the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference, used for disciples of various sects to exchange ideas. At the top of the arenas, 13 chairs were arranged. They represented the 13 sects of the Martial Alliance. Only the representatives of the 13 sects could sit on those chairs. According to past conventions, the martial artists representing the 13 sects were generally innate martial artists. In other words, these 13 chairs represented 13 martial arts masters. At this moment, 12 masters had already taken their seats on the 13 chairs. Only one chair was left unoccupied. Moreover, there was still an empty space on the ground. That was the position for the Nine Profound sect. The people from the Nine Profound sect haven't arrived yet. The Nine Profound sect is quite far from Mount Ken City. They should be here soon. Let's wait a bit longer. I wonder which master from the Nine Profound sect will lead the team this time. Could it be the famous Immortal Slayer Saber? Immortal Slayer Saber? It's unlikely. Although the Immortal Slayer Saber has been in the spotlight lately, He Mountain Dao hates him to the core. How could Immortal Slayer Saber dare to leave the Nine Profound sect at this time? Didn't you know? He Mountain Dao has temporarily closed their mountain for some reason. Closed the mountain? He Mountain Dao is a prestigious immortal sect. How could they just close their mountain like that? Perhaps it's because of the Immortal Slayer Saber. I heard that the Immortal Slayer Saber has a deep connection with the royal family. Anyway, I really want to see the Immortal Slayer Saber. What kind of demeanor does someone who can slay immortals with a saber have? Many disciples and martial artists were staring at the empty chair. Their eyes were filled with anticipation, hoping that the master leading the Nine Profound sect would be the Immortal Slayer Saber. In this way, they could witness the demeanor of the Immortal Slayer Saber with their own eyes. They're here. The people from the Nine Profound sect have arrived. Who was the master leading the 9 profound sect? Did the Immortal Slayer Saber come? As the 9 profound sects group arrived, the entire Martial Alliance Exchange Conference became lively. Countless martial artists craned their necks in anticipation. Their eyes were fixed on the 9 profound sects group. For a moment, the disciples of the 9 profound sect felt extremely proud. Even though they were travel-worn and had just arrived at Mount Keng City, they all held their heads high, looking spirited. However, among the disciples of Autumn Haze Mountain, one person was not as excited. Liu Hao. After being defeated by Lin Fei, he took it as a great shame. So, he practiced martial arts like crazy for several months. He actually soared from the acquired 3rd level to the acquired 6th level. Of course, Liu Hao's family also contributed a lot. But this was also due to Liu Hao's outstanding talent and his extreme efforts. Liu Hao also came to the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference with Autumn Haze Mountain this time. He wanted to see if Lin Fei was among the 9 profound sect disciples. This time, he wanted to avenge his previous disgrace. Lin Fei, your talent is quite impressive. You will most likely come to this Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. For this day, I have trained hard for months, which is equivalent to years of practice. We martial artists know shame and then become courageous. The grudge of that day saber, if we meet today, I will return it twice. Liu Hao murmured quietly. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. As for the recent popular Immortal Slayer Saber from the 9 profound sect, Liu Hao didn't pay any attention at all. Moreover, everyone was talking about the Immortal Slayer Saber. But who exactly was the Immortal Slayer Saber? What was his real name? Many people didn't know. Liu Hao didn't care either. How could he, a mere disciple, have any contact with such a lofty and influential figure? He was very clear that his biggest dream in this life was to achieve innate and become a martial arts master. However, even if he became a master, he would definitely not be able to compare with top experts like the Immortal Slayer Saber, who could stir up the world's situation. Liu Hao still had this self-awareness. The people from the 9 profound sect are here. Liu Hao fixed his gaze, searching among the 9 profound sect group. Liu Hao's eyes narrowed slightly. He locked onto a figure, Lin Fei. The Lin Fei, who had made Liu Hao flee in panic like a lost dog at the Zhong family that day, had indeed come. Lin Fei, you really came. It seems that I'm still lucky. Today, I have the opportunity to avenge my past disgrace. Liu Hao was very excited. He had been practicing hard for months for this day. After that, Liu Hao watched as Lin Fei and his group came to the seats reserved for the 9 profound sect at the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. Then, Liu Hao saw Lin Fei stand up. Surprisingly, he walked towards the 13 chairs reserved for the masters. What was Lin Fei doing? Those 13 chairs were reserved for martial arts masters. Lin Fei was an acquired disciple. What was he doing there? However, Lin Fei didn't stop. Instead, under Liu Hao's astonished gaze, step by step, he came to the empty chair. Then, Lin Fei directly sat down. Boom. Suddenly, Liu Hao's mind went blank. Could it be? Liu Hao's face turned pale. At this moment, not only was Liu Hao shocked, everyone at the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference was stunned. Lin Fei was so young, yet he sat in the chair reserved for masters. 9 profound sect Grand Elder, Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei, takes his seat. A disciple from the Martial Alliance announced loudly. Each martial arts master would be announced by a Martial Alliance disciple. This was a sign of respect for the martial arts masters. Chapter 126. Having no saber is better than having a saber. He is the Immortal Slayer Saber. Liu Hao's face turned pale. He widened his eyes, seemingly unable to believe the scene beforehand. However, the fact was right there. Lin Fei had already sat down in the chair, and even the Martial Alliance disciple announced that the Immortal Slayer Saber was Lin Fei. At this moment, Liu Hao felt as if all the strength had left his body. His body was even trembling. He had practiced hard for months, just waiting for the day when he could meet Lin Fei and avenge his past disgrace. But what about now? Lin Fei was the Immortal Slayer Saber. That was a top expert who could slay high-level chi cultivators from He Mountain Dao with his saber. He was a martial arts master, the Grand Elder of the Nine Profound Sect. How could he avenge his past disgrace? How can a firefly compete with the bright moon? Liu Hao's face showed a bitter expression. Then, he closed his eyes and stopped talking. At this moment, when Lin Fei took his seat, the Martial Alliance announced it, instantly setting off a commotion throughout the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. Almost all martial artists' gazes were focused on Lin Fei. Among them, there were some eager gazes, filled with a touch of reverence. It was at this time that Lin Fei began to faintly understand how famous he was now in the martial arts world. Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei, in just a few months, had slain several chi cultivators from He Mountain Dao. His fame then spread rapidly. Throughout the entire Great Chan, he had already surpassed the reputation of countless veteran masters. His popularity was at its peak. I didn't expect the famous Immortal Slayer Saber to be so young. Just now, when Immortal Slayer Saber was among the Nine Profound Sect group, I thought he was an ordinary disciple. I didn't expect him to be a martial arts master. This Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei is really low-key. He looks just like the other disciples of the Nine Profound Sect. Who would have thought that he is the famous Immortal Slayer Saber? But why doesn't the Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei carry a saber? For a while, many people were discussing. Of course, many people also noticed that Lin Fei didn't have a saber on him. One has to know that Lin Fei was the Immortal Slayer Saber. He had slain several chi cultivators with his saber. Lin Fei's saber was incredibly sharp, that could not only cut down high-level chi cultivators but also innate martial artists. However, there was no trace of a saber on Lin Fei. Could it be that Lin Fei practiced a type of martial arts that involved concealing a saber? In the martial arts world, there was some peculiar martial arts. For example, the hidden saber technique. It involves hiding a saber in the most concealed places on one's body, making it difficult for others to detect. But once in combat, the saber is drawn silently, making it hard for the opponent to defend against. However, the hidden saber technique was ultimately a peculiar martial art. The emphasis was on peculiar. If it was seen through by others, it would lose its power. As for chi cultivators, especially high-level chi cultivators, they had magical artifacts to protect themselves, so they wouldn't care about martial artists' peculiar skills. There was only one way. That was to use overwhelming power, crush everything in its path, and defeat them head-on. Although curious about where Lin Fei's saber was hidden, no one asked him. At this time, the focus was on the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. The Martial Alliance Exchange Conference begins now. A Martial Alliance disciple announced loudly. In previous Martial Alliance Exchange Conferences, disciples from various sects would go on stage to exchange and compete with each other. There was a familiar process. Of course, there were rewards for the disciples' competitions. The rewards were provided by the various sects together. As for what the rewards were, Lin Fei didn't ask. On both sides of Lin Fei were two martial arts masters. On his left was a middle-aged man dressed in white. Judging from his attire, he should be the Grand Elder of the Hidden Sword sect. He looked to be in his early 40s, quite young. After all, many martial artists only broke through to the innate realm and became martial arts masters in their 50s or even 60s. At 40 years old, he naturally appeared young. However, he couldn't compare to Lin Fei, who was not even 20 years old. His youthfulness was somewhat excessive. On Lin Fei's right was an old man with white hair. He appeared old and frail, with a face full of wrinkles. But his spirit was still strong. As for which sect he belonged to, Lin Fei was not sure. After all, Lin Fei only knew a few sects. Lin Fei was new to the martial arts world. He hadn't spent much time in the martial arts world and hadn't made many acquaintances. Among the 13 martial arts masters, Lin Fei didn't recognize any of them. Therefore, Lin Fei didn't engage in conversation. Instead, he looked at the stage below. The Martial Alliance Exchange Conference had begun. Disciples from various sects went on stage. They demonstrated their skills and began to exchange and compete. This was Lin Fei's first time watching disciples' competitions as a Grand Elder and a martial arts master. After all, Lin Fei used to be on the stage, not in the role of a judge. This made him feel a little novel. However, after watching for a while, Lin Fei found it somewhat dull. These acquired realm disciples displayed various martial arts, studying martial arts techniques and moves. It seemed lively. But in reality, they were quite vulnerable. The essence of martial arts lies in oneself, inner power, body, martial arts beliefs, and so on. These were the most important aspects. Lin Fei didn't practice that many martial arts in the past. Because he had long understood the essence of martial arts, practicing too many fighting martial arts and studying techniques was meaningless. At this moment, a white-clothed and heroic-looking female disciple from the Hidden Sword sect took the stage. With a single sword stroke, she basically ended the battle. As soon as the sword was drawn, a flash of white light followed. Her opponent was defeated. Her sword technique was similar to Lin Fei's saber method. Just one word, fast. Moreover, Lin Fei also noticed that this female disciple was not only fast, but her inner power was also very profound. Otherwise, speed alone would not be enough to defeat her opponent with a single sword strike. This female disciple had already grasped some of the fundamentals of martial arts, and her future was promising. Brother Lin, what do you think of my Hidden Sword sect disciple's swordsmanship? Suddenly, Lin Fei heard a voice in his ear. Lin Fei turned his head. He found that the person speaking was the innate martial artist from the Hidden Sword sect beside him, the 40-something martial arts master. What's your name, sir? Lin Fei asked. He really didn't know this master. Hidden Sword sect, Lu Zongyi. So, it's Brother Lo. Your disciple's swordsmanship is as fast as lightning and very accurate, truly extraordinary. And with exquisite inner power, her future is boundless. Lin Fei didn't hesitate to praise. This female disciple of the Hidden Sword sect was indeed very remarkable. She could be considered the disciple with the greatest potential Lin Fei had discovered in this Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. Her future attainment of the innate realm was hopeful. I heard that Brother Lin practiced saber drawing technique in the acquired realm. In my Hidden Sword sect, we also have a sword drawing technique, similar to saber drawing technique. I wonder which is superior, the sword drawing technique or saber drawing technique. Lin Fei shook his head and said, there may not be much difference. What really determines a martial artist's strength is not the martial arts moves or even which martial art they practice. It's the martial arts foundation and martial arts beliefs. This is the essence of martial arts. Lu Zongyi's eyes lit up, and he continued, that's right. The essence of martial arts is not about martial arts techniques or moves, but about martial arts beliefs and the foundation laid down earlier. My Hidden Sword sect disciples practice swordsmanship for 10 years like a single day. Every day, they practice and spar with swords, always accompanied by their swords. Every moment, the sword is never far from them, and they cherish their swords as they cherish their lives. Only in this way can they achieve something in swordsmanship. But I haven't seen a saber on Brother Lin. I know a thing or two about whether Brother Lin has a saber or not. Since Brother Lin is the immortal slayer saber, how can he slay immortals without a saber? Could it be that Brother Lin has already given up using the saber? Lu Zongyi expressed doubt in his heart. How could the immortal slayer saber slay immortals without a saber? As a swordsman, Lu Zongyi could naturally sense whether Lin Fei had a saber. So he knew that Lin Fei hadn't practiced any hidden saber techniques. Lin Fei simply didn't carry a saber. At this point, Lu Zongyi was puzzled. For a swordsman, it is common knowledge to always have their sword with them. The same should apply to saber wielders. How could he not carry a saber? Especially when he was the famous immortal slayer saber. Lin Fei had a smile on his face, his expression calm. In fact, Lin Fei also wanted to carry a saber. However, no treasured saber could withstand his saber chi. So naturally, Lin Fei couldn't carry a saber. Instead, he used saber chi to condense and replace the saber with his hand. However, these were Lin Fei's secrets. They couldn't be easily revealed. Not to mention explaining it to Lu Zongyi, so Lin Fei closed his eyes and spoke calmly and slowly. In my hand, there is no saber, but in my heart, there is a saber. My saber is in my heart. Having no saber is better than having a saber. Upon hearing this, Lu Zongyi's body shook as if a thunderbolt exploded in his mind and kept rumbling in his mind. The look in his eyes as he stared at Lin Fei was filled with extreme astonishment. Chapter 127. The battle between saber intent and sword intent. Lu Zongyi felt as if he had received enlightenment in his mind. It was as if he had grasped a ray of inspiration. What a concept! Having no saber is better than having a saber. No saber in hand, but a saber in the heart. No wonder you are the immortal slayer saber, even though you have just reached the innate level, but in terms of the saber realm, you have already reached the peak. Lu Zongyi's emotion surged. For a long time, his sword realm had not made any progress. And now, Lin Fei's few words seemed to have suddenly enlightened Lu Zongyi. Flashes of inspiration kept appearing in his mind. Brother Lin, please accept my salute. Lu Zongyi was obviously a genuine gentleman, or perhaps a sword fanatic. He was devoted to the sword all his life, which led him to his current level. Lin Fei's words were worth 10 years of hard work. Lu Zongyi's actions were noticed by others, especially the martial arts masters nearby. They all looked at Lu Zongyi and Lin Fei with a hint of shock. They didn't know what had gotten into Lu Zongyi, who was actually saluting Lin Fei. Whoosh! The next moment, Lu Zongyi jumped onto one of the empty arenas. Then, he shouted to Lin Fei, "Hidden Sword Sect's Lu Zongyi specially seeks advice from Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei. I hope Brother Lin can come on stage and exchange pointers with me." Lu Zongyi's words left everyone somewhat dumbfounded. It was well known that the arena was for the disciples of various sects to exchange ideas. Why did Lu Zongyi take the stage? After all, Lu Zongyi was the Grand Elder of the Hidden Sword Sect. He was also a young martial arts master, and his swordsmanship was very profound. An innate expert was actually going on stage himself. And most importantly, the one Lu Zongyi was challenging was the Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei. For a moment, this naturally caused a sensation. What is Lu Zongyi doing? How can a respectable innate expert, martial arts master, and the Grand Elder of the Hidden Sword Sect act so recklessly? Although the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference does not forbid martial artists from exchanging ideas, isn't a martial arts master being too impatient? The disciples haven't even finished their matches, what's the hurry for Lu Zongyi? However, I'm looking forward to the battle between Lu Zongyi and Lin Fei. Let's see whose swordsmanship is more powerful, Lu Zongyi's or the Immortal Slayer saber techniques. The other martial arts masters were somewhat dissatisfied, but the disciples' eyes were shining. Their emotions were extremely exciting. A battle between two innate experts. Moreover, it was a contest between a swordsman and a saber wielder. There is no first in literature, no second in martial arts. It is the same in the martial arts world. Conflicts between saber and sword often occur. Which is more powerful, the saber or the sword? This has been a long-standing debate in the martial arts world. And now they could witness such an intense and exciting battle. How could these acquired martial artists not be excited and thrilled? Challenge me. Lin Fei's eyes narrowed slightly. He saw the fighting spirit of Lu Zongyi. However, he did not immediately agree. Even if Lu Zongyi was an innate martial artist and a martial arts master, so what? Not everyone was qualified to challenge Lin Fei. Otherwise, wouldn't Lin Fei be troubled by challenges wherever he went? Therefore, Lin Fei remained silent. Lu Zongyi seemed to guess Lin Fei's thoughts. He took a deep breath. Then, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body. Boom. This aura condensed into a huge sword phantom above Lu Zongyi's head that only innate martial artists could see it. At the same time, around the arena, disciples of various sects and some wandering martial artists, anyone holding a sword in their hand, these swords were trembling slightly. Faintly, it seemed that there was a light humming sound. What's going on? Is my sword moving? Sword intent. Lu Zongyi has comprehended sword intent. Is this sword intent? I thought only one master in the Hidden Sword sect had comprehended sword intent. Hidden Sword sect has always been mysterious. Letting Lu Zongyi lead the team this time may be to showcase the strength of the Hidden Sword sect. That's right, although the Hidden Sword sect is named a hidden sword, in fact, the sword should not be hidden. The sword should be exposed and it should be displayed openly. Hidden Sword sect, worthy of being a deep-rooted martial arts sect, once gave birth to a martial saint. Even though the sword saint passed away 300 years ago, the Hidden Sword sect still has outstanding talents. Now another master who has comprehended sword intent has emerged. No wonder Lu Zongyi has the confidence to challenge Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei. It turns out he has comprehended sword intent. Lu Zongyi truly has the qualification to fight Lin Fei. What kind of sparks will the collision of sword intent and saber intent create? How exciting would it be? For a moment, countless people's gazes were on Lin Fei. Now, Lu Zongyi had already challenged Lin Fei. Moreover, he had even displayed his sword intent. Would Immortal Slayer Saber Lin Fei accept or decline? Sword intent. A glint of light flashed in Lin Fei's eyes as well. Ever since Lin Fei had comprehended martial Dao true intent, he had not encountered a second martial artist who had comprehended martial Dao true intent except for his master Zhao Kunmin. But since Zhao Kunmin had comprehended sword intent, Lin Fei had never exchanged pointers with him. Therefore, Lin Fei was indeed very interested in other martial artists with sword intent. Martial artists were meant to battle against heaven and earth. Fighting was the instinct of martial artists. So, Lin Fei spoke, the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference is for martial artists to exchange ideas with each other. Since Master Lu Zongyi wants to exchange pointers, I will gladly accompany him. Lin Fei slowly stood up. However, Lin Fei did not quickly come to the arena. Instead, he took one step at a time. With a very slow and steady pace, he walked over slowly. With every step Lin Fei took, the momentum on his body became stronger. After arriving at the arena, Lin Fei's momentum finally reached its peak. Boom. Saber intent. Lin Fei's saber intent erupted completely. Moreover, Lin Fei had honed his saber intent on ancestral master Peik. Although it hadn't reached transcendence, the saber intent had indeed become stronger. Therefore, when the saber intent fully erupted, it instantly enveloped the entire exchange meeting in the sky. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As Lin Fei's saber intent erupted, the sabers in those saber-wielding martial artists' hands also began to vibrate intensely. Moreover, the vibrations were very intense. As a result, a strange scene appeared among the many martial artists. The sounds of swords and sabers hummed one after another. Many martial artists were astonished. In the void, it seemed as if there were two invisible forces constantly clashing with each other. Crack. Many people seemed to feel that Lin Fei's saber intent and Lu Zhongyi's sword intent were constantly entwining and colliding. It was as if even the void would be torn apart. Of course, this was an illusion. Both Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi's saber and sword intent had not yet reached the level of being able to tear apart space. That was simply impossible. But in the perception of many innate powerhouses, the collision of Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi's martial Dao true intent made these innate experts feel a strong sense of threat. Martial Dao true intent was not only effective against qi-condensing cultivators, but it was also a part of martial arts strength. Whether or not an innate martial artist had martial Dao true intent made a huge difference. How terrifying saber intent and sword intent. Both Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi are extremely young. I didn't expect them to have comprehended saber intent and sword intent to such an extent. Immortal Slayer Saber is truly extraordinary. His saber intent is clearly stronger than Lu Zhongyi's sword intent. Saber intent is indeed stronger for Lin Fei. However, in a martial artist's battle, as long as martial Dao true intent is not crushed, the outcome still depends on their martial arts. The swordsmanship of the Hidden Sword sect is unparalleled in the world. It's hard to predict who will win and who will lose in this battle. Although Lin Fei is known as the Immortal Slayer Saber, he only faced high-level qi-condensing cultivators who were suppressed by his saber intent. In terms of real strength, Lu Zhongyi is not inferior to Lin Fei and may even be stronger. These martial arts masters' eyes were sharp and experienced. They all knew that the current situation between Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi was just a competition between martial Dao true intent. For martial artists, as long as martial Dao true intent doesn't collapse, it still depends on their own martial arts in the end. Both Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi were motionless as if they were looking for each other's flaws. They didn't make a move, but once they did, they would decide the outcome. At the level of Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi, martial arts, lightness techniques, and martial Dao true intent were all top-notch. To decide the outcome, one move was enough. Chapter 128. Sudden change, Qi cultivators arrive. Just as the momentum of the two reached its peak, preparing to decide the victory with one move, a crane's cry suddenly came from the distance. At the same time, Lin Fei and Lu Zhongyi both felt something. They immediately looked towards the distant sky. In the sky, more than 10 immortal cranes flew over the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference. On the cranes, there were more than 10 Qi cultivators wearing Taoist robes. Yes, Qi cultivators. At a glance, innate martial artists could sense the spiritual power fluctuations of the Qi cultivators. Among them, an old man with white hair and proud eyes glanced at the many martial artists below. Then he shouted loudly, "I am Yuan Ganzi from Guardian Primordial Mountain. I am tracking a demonic cultivator who stole our Guardian Primordial Mountain's cultivation technique, and he deserves death for his crime. This demonic cultivator has blended into the crowd and may be among the Martial Alliance. So, I have no choice but to offend you all, and I must find this demonic cultivator today. Before the demonic cultivator is found, no one is allowed to leave the mountain. Set up the formation." As Yuan Ganzi gave the order, more than 10 Qi cultivators behind him who were sitting on immortal cranes jumped off the cranes directly. Formation flights in their hands were placed in all directions in an instant. Buzz. The next moment, the entire Martial Alliance headquarters was separated by a layer of light. This was a formation that completely sealed the inside and outside. Once someone tried to leave, Yuan Ganzi would be alerted. No one could escape. "Yuan Ganzi, what do you want? Today is our Martial Alliance's grand event. Quickly withdraw your formation to save face." "That's right, Yuan Ganzi, let's talk about whatever matter you have after the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference is over." For a moment, many older martial arts masters from various sects stood up, angry at Yuan Ganzi. Although their tone was severe, there seemed to be a hint of apprehension. Guardian Primordial Mountain. Lin Fei's eyebrows furrowed slightly. He had never heard of Guardian Primordial Mountain. At this time, Liu Zonyi, who was opposite Lin Fei, had already withdrawn his sword intent. His face was pale, and he said in a deep voice, "Guardian Primordial Mountain is the only immortal sect near Ken City Mountain. Like He Mountain Dao, it is a major sect in the Immortal Taoist school. There are many top chi cultivators in the sect. More importantly, Guardian Primordial Mountain has a chi condensation perfection cultivator. It is said that within a short period of time, no more than a year, he will definitely succeed in forming his foundation. So, Guardian Primordial Mountain has been acting quite unscrupulously recently." Lin Fei understood. He looked at Yuan Gangzi, who was still sitting on the back of the immortal crane, looking down at all the martial artists below from a high position. As for those Guardian Primordial Mountain's chi cultivators, their eyes were indifferent. They didn't care about the curses from the martial artists below. More importantly, there was no fear in their eyes. Perhaps in the eyes of the chi cultivators of Guardian Primordial Mountain, the martial alliance is nothing at all. Keng City Mountain, rather than being the territory of the martial alliance, it is more like the sphere of influence of Guardian Primordial Mountain. Too much bullying. This is the headquarters of the martial alliance, not the gate of your Guardian Primordial Mountain. Talking about sealing off just like that, what do you Guardian Primordial Mountain think of us? The martial alliance's 13 sects were established initially to counter the immortal sects. But what about now? Although they were angrily cursing one by one, not a single one dared to take action. Even the mighty innate martial artists and martial arts masters, facing the chi cultivators of Guardian Primordial Mountain, didn't even dare to make a move. Martial Alliance. Lin Fei glanced at the martial arts masters of the martial alliance's 13 sects. He was very disappointed. These martial arts masters, innate experts, were unattainable powerhouses in the eyes of ordinary disciples. But what about now? Facing the chi cultivators of Guardian Primordial Mountain, they didn't even dare to make a move. Yuan Gangzi had already set up a formation directly. It was equivalent to sealing off all the martial artists here. This is a disgrace. The disgrace of martial artists. Brother Lin, are you very disappointed? At this moment, Liu Zonyi suddenly spoke up. His eyes were sharp as a sword. This is the martial alliance. Or rather, this is the martial artist of today. For hundreds of years, they've been suppressed by the chi cultivators. Facing the chi cultivators, martial artists have long lost their bravery. Moreover, do you know why those innate martial artists don't dare to make a move at all? Because Yuan Gangzi is at the 11th level of chi condensation. That is, a top chi condensation cultivator. Other than martial arts grandmasters, no one among martial artists can fight against top chi condensation cultivators. Lin Fei understood. No wonder Yuan Gangzi was so fearless. Even in the face of hundreds of martial artists and 13 martial arts masters, he remained unflustered. Even standing proudly on the back of the immortal crane, looking down at the crowd. That's because Yuan Gangzi had enough confidence. The 11th level of chi condensation was a truly top chi condensation cultivator. Chi condensation also had 12 levels. And those above the 10th level could be called top chi cultivators. Unless martial arts grandmasters, no one could compete with top chi cultivators. Of course, except for some rare and exceptional talents. However, the current martial arts world was in decline. Where were those rare and exceptional talents? Even martial arts grandmasters are few and far between. On the back of the immortal crane, Yuan Gangzi stood with his hands behind his back. With an indifferent gaze, he looked at the martial artists below and said coldly, "All of you cooperate well with the search by my Guardian Primordial Mountain disciples. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy." Domineering. This is Yuan Gangzi. This is Guardian Primordial Mountain. This is the Immortal Sect. Some acquired martial artists clenched their teeth, obviously furious to the extreme. Guardian Primordial Mountain's chi-condensing disciples were about to begin their search. Fuck your search. Die. Martial artists never lack bravery. Some acquired martial artists or hot-tempered wanderers couldn't hold back the anger in their hearts. They attacked the chi-condensing disciples who came to search. However, the next moment, these acquired martial artists couldn't even break through the defensive spells of these disciples. They were killed by the magical artifacts activated by the chi-condensing disciples, their heads severed or their hearts pierced. A strong smell of blood filled the air. Many martial artists were extremely angry, but they dared not speak. They were acquired martial artists and they couldn't even break the defensive spells of the chi cultivators. What could they do to resist? Only innate martial artists could use innate true chi to break through the spells and magical artifacts of the chi cultivators to compete with them. However, out of the 13 innate martial artists who would dare to take action, buzz. Many martial artists' swords suddenly began to hum. Sword intent. It was Lu Zongyi who had unleashed his sword intent. Yuan Ganzi, martial artists are not to be insulted. Lu Zongyi's eyes were as sharp as a sword. At this moment, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Whoosh! Lu Zongyi drew his sword. He pulled out the sword from behind him. Even just now, when Lu Zongyi challenged Lin Fei, he didn't draw his long sword. But now, he unsheathed his sword. Sword control slash. Lu Zongyi's voice was loud and resounding, echoing in everyone's ears. At the same time, his sword actually flew out directly, carrying a meter of sword energy and soaring sword intent, slashed fiercely at Yuan Ganzi. Boom. Everyone looked at Yuan Ganzi in the void. Sword intent plus a meter of sword energy, none of the martial arts masters present, except Lin Fei, dared to guarantee that they could withstand Lu Zongyi's sword. This was also Lu Zongyi's strongest sword. However, this sword stopped. It stopped 3 meters in front of Yuan Ganzi. Yuan Ganzi didn't even move his body. He just stared coldly at Lu Zongyi below. Even his eyes were filled with a hint of pity and mockery. Sword intent is indeed not bad. You martial artists always think that with sword intent you can slash us chi cultivators. How ignorant. And the recently popular Immortal Slayer saber, killing 2 useless He Mountain Dao disciples, was exaggerated by you as an Immortal Slayer. Today, even if I stand here, that Immortal Slayer saber won't hurt a hair on my body. As for you, the innate martial artist of Hidden Sword Sect, go to hell. Yuan Ganzi stretched out his hand, pointed at Lu Zongyi, and flicked his finger lightly. Whoosh! A silver flash appeared and disappeared in an instant. Flying sword. This is a real flying sword. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Lu Zongyi. The flying sword didn't reveal any earth-shattering aura, only the ultimate sharpness. Lu Zongyi could only slash out with his sword again. A massive amount of innate true chi erupted instantly. However, the flying sword seemed unaffected. Its speed increased dramatically. It pierced through Lu Zongyi's protective true chi in an instant. Lu Zongyi knew he couldn't block Yuan Ganzi's flying sword. So, he closed his eyes in despair. Snap. The next moment, a fair hand reached out in front of Lu Zongyi. It gently grabbed the sharp flying sword that was aimed at him. Chapter 129. This is my saber. Silence. The entire Martial Alliance Exchange Conference suddenly became quiet that even the sound of people's breathing could be heard. One could hear a pin drop. Lu Zongyi felt something was off. It seemed like he hadn't died. Lu Zongyi slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was a fair hand in front of him. Following the direction of the hand, he saw that in this fair palm there was actually a delicate, exquisite-looking flying sword. The flying sword had no handle and was faintly silver-white in color. An endless sharp aura emanated from the flying sword. This was the flying sword that had just pierced through Lu Zhongyi's protective true qi. In the hands of a qi condensation cultivator, a small flying sword could kill invisibly. Even a martial arts master like Lu Zhongyi, who possessed sword intent, couldn't block it. But at this moment, this terrifying flying sword was being held by a fair hand. Even though the flying sword was struggling violently, it was to no avail. "Brother Lin." Lu Zhongyi's eyes suddenly focused. It was Lin Fei. Moreover, Lin Fei had actually caught the flying sword with his flesh and blood hand. How was this possible? This was a flying sword. The flying swords refined by qi cultivators were made of special materials. The material was better than any treasure saber. Very hard, almost indestructible, and extremely sharp. Lu Zhongyi had never heard of anyone being able to directly catch a flying sword with their bare hands. But now, the fact was right before his eyes. Although the flying sword was constantly struggling and the sharp aura of the flying sword continuously cut Lin Fei's palm, trying to escape from Lin Fei's hand, the jade-like palm seemed harder than refined steel. No matter how the flying sword struggled, it was futile. This scene shocked everyone. Even those innate experts and martial arts masters were dumbfounded, with waves of astonishment surging in their hearts. Is it true that a mere flesh and blood hand can grasp the flying sword of a top-notch qi condensation cultivator? Everyone says that Immortal Slayer Saber has an incredibly sharp saber technique. But his body is so strong too. Is he even a martial artist? Something's not right. There seems to be some power in Lin Fei's hand. Is it innate true qi? Innate true qi can suppress a flying sword and even prevent its struggle. Innate experts were shocked by this scene. Not to mention the acquired martial artists. They were beyond words with shock. Catching a flying sword with bare hands, was this still the martial artist they knew? "Who are you?" At this moment, Yuan Ganzi spoke. His expression was a mix of shock and anger. Knowing that his flying sword was caught by someone with their bare hands, he knew it was serious. He was very familiar with his own flying sword. How could someone catch a flying sword with their bare hands? But the reality was right in front of him, and he had no choice but to believe it. "Who am I?" Lin Fei smiled. He looked down at the flying sword in his palm. Then, he gently applied force. Crack! The flying sword shattered. Not only did Lin Fei catch the flying sword with his bare hands, he even crushed the flying sword with his bare hands. Puff! Yuan Ganzi spat out a mouthful of blood. The flying sword and the qi cultivator were connected in life. Especially this flying sword, which had been refined by Yuan Ganzi for decades. Now that the flying sword was suddenly destroyed, Yuan Ganzi naturally suffered some backlash. "How do you destroy my flying sword?" There was still blood at the corner of Yuan Ganzi's mouth, and his expression became distorted with anger. "Who are you?" There was a cold killing intent in Yuan Ganzi's voice. "Didn't you just say that if you stand still and let me attack, you won't be harmed in the slightest? Now you're asking me who I am." Lin Fei's words made Yuan Ganzi's eyes suddenly focus. Immortal Slayer Saber. Yuan Ganzi finally understood. The martial artist in front of him was none other than the Immortal Slayer Saber, whose recent exploits had caused a sensation throughout Great Chan. Before, Yuan Ganzi thought that the two qi cultivators from He Mountain Dao were just too incompetent. They were killed by a mere martial artist. Even if it was an innate martial artist, what of it? As long as it wasn't a grandmaster, killing any innate martial artist wasn't a problem for Yuan Ganzi. However, now that he faced the real Immortal Slayer Saber, he suddenly realized. Maybe it wasn't that the two high-level qi condensation cultivators from He Mountain Dao were too incompetent. Immortal Slayer Saber, Lin Fei might be truly extraordinary. At least, Yuan Ganzi had never heard of any martial artist who dared to catch a flying sword barehanded and without any harm to themselves. Lin Fei released his hand. He casually threw the fragments of the flying sword to the ground. In fact, Lin Fei was able to catch the flying sword with his bare hands because of saber chi. Lin Fei's saber chi had long been spread all over his palm. The saber chi far surpassed innate true chi that even a flying sword couldn't penetrate it. No matter how the flying sword struggled, Lin Fei's saber chi firmly trapped the flying sword. Even more, Lin Fei unleashed his saber chi, easily crushing it. Lin Fei looked at Lu Zongyi and said calmly, "Brother Lu, didn't you want to see my saber? Now, I'll show you my saber." The next moment, Lin Fei extended his fair hand. Boom! Lin Fei's saber chi within his body erupted instantly. At the same time, the saber chi that burst from Lin Fei's palm was immense. In the void, saber energy as tall as 30 meters was directly condensed. The terrifying sharpness radiated from it. Even a glance from afar would make the eyes feel stinging pain. Saber chi was formed by the fusion of saber intent and a large amount of innate true chi. Every strand of saber chi contained saber intent. The saber chi as tall as 30 meters suddenly spanned across the void. Even Lu Zongyi, a well-versed martial arts master, couldn't help but widen his eyes. Shocking. An unparalleled shock. A typical innate martial artist having a 3-meter saber energy was already extraordinary. And now, Lin Fei had a 30-meter saber energy, and it was 10 or even 100 times stronger than the saber light. At the same time, the 30-meter saber energy fatally gave people the feeling that it was like a peerless fierce blade. A killing aura emanated from the 10-meter saber chi. Watch closely, this is my saber. Heavenly saber art, / Lin Fei's eyes were cold. He directly waved his hand and slashed fiercely toward Yuan Ganzi in the distance. Boom! The terrifying saber energy was surging and overwhelming. Yuan Ganzi wanted to avoid it at first moment. However, he suddenly discovered that a killing aura locked him in. It seemed that no matter how he dodged, he couldn't escape. This was the heavenly saber art. Below mastery, it condensed a fierce saber. It could emit a killing aura, locking onto the opponent's breath, leaving the opponent with no escape. It was Lin Fei's first time using the heavenly saber art to condense a fierce saber against an enemy, but it wasn't his first time using saber chi. Therefore, this time using saber chi was incredibly satisfying for Lin Fei. As long as I want, the saber is there. Victory without a saber. The saber is in the heart, and only then can this saber be unleashed. Lin Fei's words echoed in everyone's ears. Like the sound of a giant bell, it made all martial artists feel enlightened. To what extent had his saber realm reached? This youngster, his saber technique can reach divine levels. After a long time, a white-haired martial arts master, staring at the 30-meter saber energy in the void and said, Chapter 130. Who in the world would dare to take on Lin Fei's saber? Compared to the shock of others, Yuan Ganzi, who was locked by the 30-meter saber energy, felt like a lost soul. He seemed to have already sensed the threat of death. I am at the 11th level of chi condensation. I have high hopes for building my foundation in the future. How can I be afraid of a mere martial artist? This saber energy must be superficially strong but weak inside. It's impossible to break through my spells. Also, my magical artifact, the 4 divine umbrella, block it. Yuan Ganzi slapped his forehead. Suddenly, an umbrella-shaped magical artifact flew out of his body. The magical artifact instantly opened, enveloping Yuan Ganzi inside. At the same time, Yuan Ganzi grabbed a large handful of talismans from his bosom. No matter what kind of talismans, his spiritual power crazily flowed, pouring into the talismans. He threw them directly at the terrifying 30-meter saber chi in the void. Rumbling. Countless talismans, dozens, even hundreds of them, instantly unleashed their spells. However, these spells were varied. The real defensive spells were few and far between. Under the immense saber energy, they were completely crushed and cut, instantly turned into dust. At the same time, the 30-meter saber energy finally fell, and the void seemed to emit a muffled sound. Yuan Gangzi was originally standing on a crane. But now, he was pressed down by Lin Fei's 30-meter saber chi. Both the person and the crane fell to the ground. The terrifying power acted on the crane's body. Splutter. The crane let out a mournful cry. Then, the force of the saber energy slashed directly and crushed the crane into a pool of blood. Yuan Gangzi's face was full of horror. The defensive spells he had cast, and even several layers of them, turned out to be as fragile as paper, easily cut open by the saber energy. The terrifying saber chi even directly landed on his 4 divine umbrella. The 4 divine umbrella was a half-finished magical treasure personally refined by a foundation establishment cultivator. All the materials used were suitable for magical treasure. It was just that the refining process failed in the end. So it didn't become a magical treasure. It was considered a semi-finished product, an inferior one. But when used by Yuan Gangzi, who was at the 11th level of chi condensation, its defensive ability had reached a very terrifying peak. Yuan Gangzi's hope was all in these 4 divine umbrella. The 30-meter saber energy was like a mountain pressing down on him. With unstoppable momentum, it fiercely slashed on the 4 divine umbrella. The sharpness of the saber energy and the terrifying saber intent it contained made Yuan Gangzi extremely nervous. The protective barrier of the 4 divine umbrella was brutally flattened by the saber energy. Block it, you must block it. Yuan Gangzi's eyes turned bloodshot, full of blood vessels. However, the 4 divine umbrella ultimately couldn't withstand Lin Fei's 30-meter saber energy. Crack. The 4 divine umbrella shattered. Its spiritual light dimmed, no longer having any effect. Yuan Gangzi could only watch helplessly as the terrifying saber energy effortlessly cut through his protective spiritual power like cutting through a tofu. Bang! Yuan Gangzi's figure was engulfed in the 30-meter saber energy. In an instant, he was shredded into a mist of blood by the saber energy. The terrifying saber energy even had remaining power, landing on the ground, slashed a huge crack. Silence. Very quiet. The Martial Alliance exchange event, with hundreds or even thousands of people, was originally lively. The crowd was noisy. But now, it seemed to be silent. All the martial artists just stared blankly at the huge crack in the ground. Was that the crack created by Lin Fei's saber energy? Even, it incidentally killed a top-level chi condensation cultivator. That was an 11th level chi condensation cultivator, a core elder of Guardian Primordial Mountain. And now? Dead. Yuan Gangzi died just like that under Lin Fei's saber energy, in one move. Yuan Gangzi couldn't even withstand a single move. Just like the 2 high-level chi condensation cultivators from He Mountain Dao in the rumors, they were killed by Lin Fei with a single slash. Yuan Gangzi was a top-level chi condensation cultivator. It seemed that he wasn't much stronger than the chi condensation cultivators of He Mountain Dao. The outcome was the same. Immortal Slayer Saber, this is the real Immortal Slayer Saber. Another chi condensation cultivator has died. This time, it's a top-level one. How many chi cultivators have died at the hands of the Immortal Slayer Saber? Sure enough, there are only wrong names in the martial world, but no wrong titles. The Immortal Slayer Saber truly lives up to its name. With the saber out, it slays immortals. Is this Immortal Slayer Saber really martial arts? The power of this saber is probably not inferior to that of a Grandmaster, right? Even in some aspects, a Grandmaster might not be able to slash out such a terrifying saber. Some martial artists couldn't help but think of martial arts Grandmasters. It seemed that the Grandmasters in the rumors were nothing more than this. Of course, martial arts Grandmasters also varied in strength. The difference was very significant. For example, the Grandmaster liked the founder of the Nine Profound sect, who was invincible below foundation. Establishment. Even if it was a chi condensation cultivator at the peak of perfection, when facing the Nine Profound sect founder, it would only take a single slash. Otherwise, how could they be called invincible? The title of invincible isn't so easy to obtain. It's based on real achievements. Dominating the world, invincible in all directions. At this moment, Lin Fei seemed no different from being invincible in the eyes of some martial artists. They had just witnessed Lin Fei unleash a 30-meter-tall saber energy. How terrifying was that? They didn't know what kind of person or power could withstand such a 30-meter saber energy. This saber technique. Lu Zongyi's gaze was complicated as he looked at Lin Fei, unable to speak for a long time. Such a saber technique was beyond his ability to describe. He even felt that his decades of practicing the sword paled in comparison to Lin Fei's single saber strike. Even if he practiced his sword for another 100 years, it would be no match for Lin Fei's saber. Lin Fei stood with his hands behind his back, looking at Lu Zongyi, and calmly asked, "Brother Lu, do you still wish to continue the exchange?" Upon hearing this, Lu Zongyi couldn't help but shake his head, sighing, "Master Lin's saber technique is divine. I admit my inferiority. Consider this exchange a joke on my part." Lu Zongyi admitted defeat, wholeheartedly accepting it. Clearly, he had been thoroughly convinced by Lin Fei's saber strike just now. At this point, the chi condensation cultivator's guardian primordial mountain finally came to their senses. How could they continue to blockade the martial alliance? They quickly collected their flags, jumped onto the back of their immortal cranes, and fled in panic. In the blink of an eye, they vanished without a trace. Gone was their arrogance from before. This allowed many martial artists to witness the weak side of the chi cultivators for the first time. Immortal sect's chi condensation cultivators were nothing more than that. "Master Lin, let's end this martial alliance exchange conference here. After this incident, it would be best for Master Lin to leave Ken City Mountain quickly. Guardian Primordial Mountain has not only top chi condensation cultivators but also powerful cultivators close to Foundation establishment. Moreover, the martial alliance isn't far from Guardian Primordial Mountain. If the Guardian Primordial Mountain sect leader becomes furious and brings the mountain protecting treasure, it'll be troublesome. Guardian Primordial Mountain's mountain protecting treasure is a genuine magical treasure. If set up in a grand formation, even an ordinary Foundation establishment cultivator can't break through." Some masters of the Martial Alliance's 13 factions urged Lin Fei to leave quickly. A mountain protecting treasure that even Foundation establishment cultivators can't break. A hint of curiosity flashed in Lin Fei's eyes. These immortal sects had a heritage spanning over 1,000 years. Even the great Chan's founding emperor, the mighty martial Sate, could only suppress but not completely annihilate these immortal sects. It seemed that it was because of these sects' mountain protecting treasures. Well, this Martial Alliance Exchange Conference has come to an end, and it's time to leave. Lin Fei nodded in agreement. He had killed Yuan Ganzi simply because Yuan Ganzi had provoked him. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one would choose to confront an immortal sect with a 1,000-year heritage. Lin Fei was no exception. As long as he returned to the Nine Profound sect, Guardian Primordial Mountain would have no way to deal with him. "Brother Lin, once everything settles down, please do visit our Hidden Sword sect. Our Hidden Sword sect has produced a martial saint. As for sword intent perfectionists, there have been several throughout history. We won't disappoint you." Lu Zongyi enthusiastically invited Lin Fei to be a guest at the Hidden Sword sect. Lin Fei's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Sword intent perfection? Martial saints? Both had appeared in the Hidden Sword sect's history. In terms of foundation, it was much stronger than the Nine Profound sect. If I have the time, I will definitely visit the Hidden Sword sect. After saying this, Lin Fei led the 9 profound sect disciples and quickly left the Martial Alliance. Thus, the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference came to a hasty end. Many martial artists left Ken City Mountain one after another. However, even though there were some unexpected incidents during the Martial Alliance Exchange Conference, making it an incomplete event, the martial artists who attended this exchange felt that their trip was worthwhile. Not only did they witness sword intent and saber intent, but they also saw the unparalleled prowess of the immortal Slayer saber. Lin Fei slayed immortals once again. Moreover, with a single saber strike, a 30-meter saber energy. Who in the world would dare to take on Lin Fei's saber?